Hello. So today I'll be speaking on asynchronous programming in JavaScript. So first of all, let's focus on the type of execution in JavaScript. So there are two types, synchronous and asynchronous. So what is synchronous and asynchronous? Let's understand synchronous first. So in synchronous programming, so it's not just limited to JavaScript. It happens across programming languages. So in synchronous, lines are executed one after the other. It does not happen that a certain block of code is being put into a different thread normally, but if you use multi-threading and stuff, but we'll get to those advanced concepts later on. So in synchronous, as telling, we execute the program executes one line at a time. So there's certain issues, certain problems that we can face with these kind of executions. Normally it's fine, it's going to work fine, it's going to give the predicted outcome, the expected value of running a code or a function. But certain problems are, for instance, let's say you have written a function which fetches some data from the internet and it displays onto the DOM, onto your browser. So in that case, let's say I'm on 2G and you are on 4G maybe. For some reason why I am on 2G, I don't know. So anyways, in my case, it's going to take a longer time compared to yours. And there can be scenarios wherein this request is even going to fail. Why? Because my internet connection might not be stable. I might be out of network area. So in those scenarios, synchronous programming is not going to work, wherein it takes some time for the code to finish executing. So there comes asynchronous to our rescue. So what is asynchronous? In this, multiple executions can occur at once, but it's not like that. Like a program, a block of code is being run and simultaneously another code is run. What happens here is the part of code that needs some time to execute, and we don't know how much time, we give it a callback. A callback is basically a function that is executed after the block of code is run. Okay, so what happens is, let's say, as the example before, there are some data that needs to be fetched from the internet. So what happens here is you give a callback that after you fetch this data, do one thing, render it onto the DOM. Done. So what will happen is you have this code, you tell it to run, like execute in itself, give it a thread and everything. That is automatically done by JavaScript, by the way, after you get to know how to do asynchronous programming. So, and you keep on the normal execution of the code, no issues with that. But that should not be dependent on the outcome of the code that is to be executed in in a separate thread. So what happens is after that, the data is fetched, is going to render it to the DOM. Now, there are two functions. So there's a pointer here that JavaScript is single threaded by default. So to do these kind of asynchronous tasks, it is going to use web API. It's basically provided by your browser, wherein it takes the function that has to be run and the callback function, and then it will execute that function when the original code, the async code, has finished execution. So uh, whenever JavaScript engine encounters a piece of code that will take longer time to execute, then it hands over its execution to the browser as already specified. So there's a part of code that is going to take a longer time. It's going to be given to the browser to execute and then run the callback function. There are two functions that will mainly focus on in today's video: SetTimeout and SetInterval. Both are kind of similar, but in SetTimeout, the function, so both of them takes two parameters normally, a function and the time in milliseconds. So let's say we have given them time of 3 seconds or maybe 3000 milliseconds, and we have given them function. So set timeout, what it will do is after 3 seconds is going to execute that code. Fine. But in case of set interval, after every 3 seconds, it is going to execute that code. So in set interval, it's going to execute that part of code, that block of code, after every interval. the provided interval, but in set timeout it's only going to run once. Okay, so that's it on set timeout and interval. Fine. Now, a point to note here is set timeout and set interval. These functions and these kind of functions are provided by the web API. It's not a JavaScript function. So there is one thing known as message queue or a callback queue. So what happens is, uh, so uh, the message queue or the callback queue, let's say a program is going to take more time, the async code, it's going to be added to the callback queue and it's going to execute and run its callback. And let's say there are 5 different codes that's going to take time. Add it to the callback. No issues with that. It's going to execute and do all the things necessary. The main thread is empty. It's not going to like throttle. It's not going to, stop every other task from executing. For let's say there is something to be fetched, and after that there's an execution that when the button is clicked, it's going to like uh, drop confettis onto the DOM. Okay. So in that case, it's not going to block the functionality of the button. So how does that happen? It's going to add the part of code into the message queue. And there is something known as event loop in JavaScript. It is going to like what happens is it's going to run all the code normally single in a single thread. But after it has like run all the code, all the async code had a callback function. So it's going to check for all the callback function in the message queue since that would have executed, and it will add to the it will add to the call stack and it start executing the callback function. Fine. So that is event loop. Like it's not that simple, but that is the gist of it. Okay, and which has more priority? Function already in the call stack or the new one from message queue? Awesome. So function which is already in the call stack has a greater priority. So a function which has a callback function won't have that much priority as the function or the part of block of code which is already in the call stack, the main thread. So, and let's get a gist of what promises are. So to handle such tasks, we normally use promises. So what promises are, let's say on every Indian currency, there's a line, like there's a statement below it. I promise to pay the bearer sum of something, let's say 500 rupee INR. So there could be 3 consequences to a promise. It is either fulfilled, not fulfilled, or it is in the process. So there's a progress of transaction. There's a process going on there. So in case of fulfilled, it's that I have given you 5 rupee, like 500 rupee, and you have even either given me goods or services for that amount. The second one is it will not be fulfilled. You have taken the 500, but you have not given me the service or the goods for that amount. Or the third is it's in the progress of transaction. So I have given you 500, but you are basically like taking out all the groceries and stuff to give it to me. So it's in progress. It has not still been completed or like rejected. So, okay, so JS has a promise object. So basically the declaration syntax is the data type. So normally it's var let or const. Let's say it's var promise equals new promise and then a parenthesis. So promise gets either resolved or rejected. So there you can pass in 2 functions that is run when it is resolved or either resolved or rejected. So that was a like an intro to promises. We'll dive deep into this in the next video. Thank you.